For our next segment, we're going to have an interview with one of our favorite guests, Richard Winger. Richard is the publisher of Ballot Access News, just a terrific publication. And there's really nothing that you can't find in Ballot Access News if you want to be a real student of politics and what's going on in the world. Doing an interview with Richard, to me, is like opening a bottle of fine wine. It's just such a pleasurable moment, and you know, you have to kind of savor it because he is such a encyclopedic knowledge of the political world and particularly ballot initiatives. One of the things we talk about repeatedly on this show is the incumbency protection and what incumbents do to keep other people off the ballot. And this is really one of the main focuses of Ballot Access News, all the nefarious things that are going on in the world to keep people off the ballot so incumbents can keep their jobs. Today we're going to start a segment. I think it's going to be in two parts, but we'll find out. And we're going to do a review of 2014, the year 2014, in Ballot Access News to talk about some of the more exciting aspects of what happened this year, how people ended up getting on the ballot, or how people blocked bad things from happening to keep people from being on the ballot. We're going to start out by talking about a ballot initiative, which was in Oregon, and then we're going to spend some time talking about some legislative initiatives. So, Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, I know, Richard, you were excited today to talk about what happened in Oregon with their Top 2 initiative. And on one of our last shows, you talked to the viewers and explained to them what a Top 2 initiative is. So why don't we start there? Why don't you, again, tell our viewers what a Top 2 initiative is, and then we'll get to Oregon.
It's a system invented by Louisiana Governor Edwin Edwards in 1975. It says every candidate runs in the primary, every voter gets the same primary ballot, and then only the top 2 vote getters can run in the general election. It was not started out as a way to kill minor parties, but in practice, that's what it does. We've had 3 states using the system now, and we've had 118 minor party candidates for federal or state office who ran in the top 2 system, and in which there were at least 2 major party people running. And in all 118 instances, the minor party person does not come in first or second in the primary. So you get a general election campaign season with nothing but a Democrat and a Republican, or once in a while 2 Democrats, or once in a while 2 Republicans. So the proponents of this system did an initiative to put it on the ballot in Oregon this year, and it lost. It only got 32% of the vote. 68% of the people voted against it, even though the proponents, bolstered by contributions from 2 billionaires, outspent the opponents 4-1. There's a Texas billionaire named John Arnold, and he gave $2,750,000 to the proponents of this measure. And also former Mayor Bloomberg of New York City gave almost $2 million. So from just those 2 people alone, that was almost $5 million. And we opponents in total only raised $1,500,000. And almost all of Oregon's daily newspapers endorsed it. Both major party candidates for governor endorsed it. But we still beat it over 2-1. So to me, when I review the calendar year 2014, that I think is the most significant development in ballot access law.
So, Richard, one thing I guess confusing to me, this has actually been on the ballot before in Oregon, correct?
Yes, it was also on in 2008. It also lost 2-1 then.
So why do you think it came back? Normally when things lose 2-1, they don't come back that quickly. What was the impetus to get this back on the ballot?
There was a wealthy Oregon businessman who paid to have the initiative put on the ballot. I think the proponents believe, I mean, they're sincere people. They think their system is better. They see Congress especially. In fact, I'm going to step out of nonpartisanship here. I think we all agree, not everybody, but it's the Republicans in Congress who are behaving badly, and they've been behaving badly for some time. And they seem to hate the president, and they seem to hate Harry Reid. They hate the whole Democratic Party, and it's ruining Congress. And they think their system will solve this problem, but it doesn't.
Well, that's interesting, I'm glad you gave like the disclaimer on the partisanship thing and your perspective on it. But how do they perceive that this system would cure what they believe to be the problems are?
They are remarkably unanalytic. We have, if I define South as the 11 states who seceded in 1861 and formed the Confederacy, just for clarity, when I say the South, that's what I mean. There's only one state in the South with a closed primary, and that's Florida. Most of the Tea Party members of Congress are from the South. And these proponents of Top Two, they don't look at the facts. They don't even notice that it's the open primary states that produce these extreme Republicans, not closed primaries. Closed primaries are dominant in the Northeast, and that's where the most moderate Republicans are from. It is maddening that these people, they don't look at the political science evidence. They don't look at basic facts. They don't even know off the top of their head which states have open primaries, which states have closed primaries. They go around blaming closed primaries for partisanship without looking at the evidence.
So in Oregon, I take it must be relatively easy to get on the ballot if one person was able to fund this initiative.
Well, if you have enough money, in any state that has the initiative, you can get an initiative on the ballot, with the possible exception of Illinois.
Well, but you mentioned Bloomberg. Now, a lot of people will say that Bloomberg might end up running someday as an independent, and then when he ran in New York, perhaps he was an independent. What would his state, what would an independent stake in this system have? What are they seeing?
This is where the proponents simply don't look at reality. We had two very strong independent candidates in California this year. We had Marianne Williamson, a very well-known and well-loved author who ran for Congress in the 33rd U.S. House District in West Los Angeles. She ran as an independent. She spent $1,900,000. She spent more than any non-major party candidate for U.S. House in the entire country this year. And she had hundreds of volunteers, people that just love her. But she only came in fourth in the top two primary. I think if we had a semi-closed or closed primary in California, she might have won, because if we were in a old system, normal system, as an independent, she would have petitioned directly onto the November ballot. And therefore, she would have definitely been in the race in November, whereas in reality she wasn't. So she would have had 5 more months to campaign, get people used to her ideas, used to the idea of having an independent congresswoman. Plus, she might theoretically have won with the plurality, because she would have had a Democratic opponent and a Republican opponent. So in theory, she might have won with 35% of the vote. And then we had another strong independent in California this year, Daniel Schnur, Schnur. He ran for Secretary of State as an independent, and he was endorsed by a majority of California's big newspapers. He used to be head of the campaign finance office in California. He did a very good job. Before that, he was chief of staff to 2 Republican governors. The press knows him, they just love him. And he would have been a great Secretary of State, but he came in fourth in the top 2 primary. The trouble is, in a primary, most voters are not paying attention to independent candidates or minor party candidates. They're still focused on which major party person is going to advance. Again, I think Dan Schnur could have won under a normal system for the same reasons I think Marianne Williamson could have won.
And of
So
course, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I just feel so frustrated that the proponents of Top Two will not talk about specifics. They just talk in generalities. I'd like to have a meeting with them.
Yeah, another problem too, and I think we talked about this before, is the turnouts have been so low in the primaries that it's definitely going to be skewed towards the major parties from a turnout perspective. This year was perhaps the lowest turnout we've had in primaries in how many years?
Ever.
Ever.
Only 25.2% of the registered voters of California voted in the June 2014 primary. That was easily the worst turnout in California history, and we've been having primaries since 1910.
It's frightening. And if you said 25%, that's well above the national average for primaries. I think the national average was in the teens.
That's a little misleading, though. In some states, primaries only have one person on the ballot, and in some states, when there's only one person on the ballot, they cancel the primary. So it's tricky comparing primary turnout from state to state.
Gotcha. But in Oregon, the voters have now twice, in the face of overwhelming financial odds and overwhelming endorsement odds, have defeated this concept. So that's a major statement.
Yes, it was fairly easy for the opponents to craft a message. All they had to do was say, "Look at how it's worked in California," which of course is a next door state.
So do you think the results in Oregon will dissuade people from other states from trying to take this up, or not necessarily?
It's really a good question you asked, and I don't know the answer. One of the leading forces for top two systems is the group centered in New York City called Independent Voting, and they're having a conference in March, and I'm hoping to attend, and I'm hoping we'll have a real dialogue.
Oh, interesting. Maybe you and I can chat before that. I'll meet you out there. How's that?
Great.
Perfect. All right, so you had a great success at the ballot in October in Oregon, but even before that, there was some great success this year at the legislative level in some states that did things to loosen up ballot access. So I thought we should talk about some of those. What are some of your favorites?
Well, why don't you pick one?
Well, I know California, where you live, that you had a big success this year, right?
Yeah, we got a bill through easing the definition of political party. The old law required a group to have about 104,000 registered members to qualify as a party, and the new law it's about 60,000. So that will help.
Now, where was that initiative coming from? And you normally don't see these kinds of things passing. So who was pushing that one?
Well, there's a very good, kind Democratic assemblyman from Santa Clara County, and he just thought he wanted to do that, and the bill passed unanimously. Both major party caucuses in the legislature supported it, and not a single vote was cast against it.
Interesting. So how do you think that'll make a major impact, or just not necessarily?
I'm hoping that'll make a major impact on the thinking in other states that have really bad ballot access. North Carolina has terrible ballot access, and we can now go to the North Carolina legislature and say, North Carolina now requires substantially support from more people to get a new party in the ballot than any other state. And North Carolina has 14 U.S. House. It's a middle-sized state, tending toward it's getting to be a large state.
Right.
Nevertheless, they're far from being the most populous state. Why should they require 90,000 signatures, both for a statewide independent or a new party, when no other state in the country requires more than 60,000? And that's California. We're still in second, but of course that's understandable because we have such a huge population. And we're also hoping that influences Oklahoma, which has got such terrible ballot access that nobody's been able to vote for anyone for president in Oklahoma other than the Republican and the Democrat for 14 years.
Well, I know when we talked once before, it was even worse in some of the other southern states in terms of voting for non-major parties for president, et cetera, right? Wasn't Georgia and Alabama, weren't those two of your favorite bad states?
They are very, very bad, but they aren't as bad for president as North Carolina and Oklahoma.
Interesting. All right, so we start on the West Coast, the left coast, whatever people call it. Arizona would come next. So what do they do on Arizona this year?
Well, there's another little trick that legislatures pull sometimes. Even when they make it possible for a minor party to enjoy qualified party status, they can still mess things up if they make it very difficult for a member of a minor party to get himself or herself on the primary ballot. So the Arizona Republican legislature was quite irritated that in 2012 they perceived that They lost 2 U.S. House races because libertarians were in the races. So they passed a bill making it extremely difficult for a libertarian or a green to get on the primary ballot. So if what good does it do a party to be recognized if it can't get any candidates on its primary ballot, and then it can't run any candidates in the general? But there were a lot of other things in the same bill in Arizona that irritated the Democrats and the labor unions, which is lucky because they have the financial strength and the volunteer base to do a referendum petition to put this obnoxious bill up for a vote of the people. And they got the signatures, and so the Republicans knew they'd lose the referendum vote, so they just repealed the whole bill. So we got rid of the problem that way.
Very interesting. They did not want something on the ballot that was going to be kind of called out, so they withdrew it before it could get on the ballot.
Right.
Oh, interesting. All right, again, west to east, New Mexico. What happened there?
Well, late last year, we won a lawsuit against the April petition deadline for a newly qualifying party to get on the ballot. So, as often happens when we win a case, the legislature takes the hint and they not only fix the thing that was held unconstitutional, but they put other improvements in the bill also. So we got a good bill through in New Mexico, reducing the petition burden somewhat.
Now, Richard, you've mentioned a couple times we here. Who is normally the force behind these changes? Are there certain organizations out there that you work with that take the lead on these issues?
Generally, when I say we in this context, I mean the minor party leaders in each state. Leaders.
Now, in Tennessee, they also lowered the signature requirement?
No, they haven't done that yet in Tennessee. They're stubborn.
Oh, I thought Tennessee had made a corrective change along those lines. I'm sorry.
They improved the deadline last year, but they haven't done anything else. Tennessee law is laughably silly. Tennessee only requires 25 signatures for an independent candidate for any office to get on the ballot. 25 signatures, any voter can sign, no filing fee. It couldn't be easier. Tennessee has the nation's easiest ballot access for independent candidates. But if you're an independent candidate, you have to be on the ballot with the label independent, that's all, which is not surprising. I mean, after all, it's called an independent candidate. But a new party or any minor party that didn't get 5% of the vote in the last election, they can't put their people on the ballot unless they turn in 40,000 signatures. It's crazy because in practice, the minor party candidates simply use the independent candidate procedure. So they're on the ballot anyway, but they have the wrong label.
Interesting. Well, one thing I know you point out, and I hope I'm going to give the readers a sneak preview of your December edition. Is it out already, your December edition?
Well, it's out to the print subscribers.
Okay. Well, we're going to give a sneak preview here, though. By the time the show runs, it'll probably be in the January edition. Anyway, since the turnout was so low in the midterms this year, that actually will help people getting on the ballot where there's states that have a percentage vote requirement, right? A percentage signature requirement.
But, you know, it's easy to overstate that because most states don't set the number of signatures as a percentage of the vote cast in the last election. So it helps in about a dozen states, which is significant.
That's still a victory.
It is.
So we want people to go vote, but at times when they don't go vote, there's like a silver lining on the cloud there, I guess, for the next time around.
It's more of a silver lining for people who want to get initiatives on the ballot. And half the states have the statewide initiative. So it really has more of an impact for 2016 initiatives than for minor parties and independent candidates.
Very interesting. All right, Richard, you've been a great guest as always. We're going to cut it off here, and then we're going to do another segment with you. We're going to talk about some court decisions. So thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you.